Welcome into Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football game podcast. Arky, Shea is my name. That is my good pal, Demetri Ravanos. Demetri, it's finally time to talk about the greatest sporting franchise of all time when it comes to video games. Our favorite game ever, brother.
Yeah, Arky, I said this to a buddy of mine who desperately wants to be a guest on the show, Nick Wilson of WFNZ in Charlotte. He said, "Don't let me down. I love this game." And I told him, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, after my Lord, my family, and my country, the only thing in this world I love is NCAA college football.
Oh, Demetri, from your mouth to his ears.
Yes.
Not your friends, of course, the Lord's ears.
Well, I mean, why not both?
That's a good point. It's been 3,188 days since NCAA football released NCAA Football 14, or at least EA Sports did, their most recent version of that. And yeah, we do still have that version of the game out there.
It is the reason that I absolutely refuse to upgrade from the PS3. Like, especially now, and I'm serious, now that they've gone to the PS5 where, A, you can get the version that doesn't even use discs, and B, it's not backwards compatible. Like, I may never upgrade.
Yeah, and that's why we got such great news last year when they said that they were going to, EA Sports did say that we're going to get the franchise back. They don't have the exact date set, but it's okay because it's coming next summer. So we know it's happening sooner rather than later. And the most important thing, Demetri, is like there is a glint of light on the horizon.
Agreed. I mean, I know that it's not going to be the exact same. Like there are rights issues to work out with the NCAA not involved, and that's fine. Look, we have played now for 10 years. We have played a version that is incomplete in terms of the landscape of FBS football. If we have to do that for another year or two, so be it. Because here's the thing. Let a cycle of recruiting go by having to be like, I think Georgia's the highest profile team not in the game right now. Let a cycle of recruiting go by with Kirby not being able to tell recruits, hey, you could play yourself as a video game, and see how quick Georgia ends up in the game. Like, everyone will eventually be in it.
Yeah, and I can't wait. This podcast is dedicated to the game franchise, not just to the
and of course
version.
To Kirby Smart.
And mainly Kirby Smart. My fault. Yep. That was my bad. Should we start over again? This podcast is dedicated to Kirby Smart and his relationship with the NCAA football video game franchise. Okay, good. We'll cut that in post.
Good.
So I think we talk about, and we will talk about the history of this game, who's been involved with it, cover athletes, so on and so forth. And we'll talk to a lot of people involved with it throughout the duration of this podcast. Not this particular episode, just as we do it.
Can I say something about that real quick?
Because that would be a long podcast.
This is really important. Like, we are doing this completely organically. We have no support from EA Sports, which is fine. It's why we're the unofficial podcast of this. We have no support from EA Sports. We have no support from any sort of video game journalistic entity. Like, if we land cover athletes, if we land directors, if we land writers, if we land whoever, it is all based on how popular this podcast is and how much you guys help us communicate that we unabashedly love this game.
Oh man, I'll tell you this, and the reason that I love this game so much is this, but it's my introduction really into gaming.
Sure,
right? Like the believe it or not, this was the first video game, especially franchise, that I really got into. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money or even a couple of really nickels to rub together. I grew up in a trailer park in New Hope, Alabama, right? And for the first time
look at you, Prince Arky.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry if some crowns are heavier than others.
Sure.
Okay. But I will keep my head high in this regard. But I remember the first video game module that I got with the game was the PlayStation 1, was the original PlayStation 1. But it wasn't when the PlayStation 1 was brand new.
Yep.
It was several years later. And the first game I got, and the first game was the first game I requested, was NCAA Football 2001, which was which was the summer of 2000.
Is that your point of entry into the franchise?
100% my point of entry. And ever since then, I've been fascinated by this game. In fact, I can still I can still smell. I feel like the living room that I was in, the
Yeah.
very dank living room that I was in at the time. But
S-
I can still I feel everything about sitting nose to nose with that television screen and like dialing up a new dynasty and watching, tipping it up for Auburn and Wyoming, first game
Yeah.
of the 2000 season, and starting that dynasty off, man. And that was the Sean Alexander cover. I think was 2001, if I'm not mistaken. So
So I go back a lot further than you. I had the original Bill Walsh College Football for the Sega Genesis. Like you, I can remember the game or the room where I first played it. I got it for Christmas. It had to be 93 because I was 12 years old, and I remember how all the games, like, it was a long tradition. The biggest bowl game back before we had a national championship game was your starting matchup, was the default matchup that the game opened with, and this would started with Alabama and Miami. So yeah, 93 would have been the year. I remember playing it, excuse me, at my cousin's house in their bedroom, and I remember that I didn't even get to be the first one to play. Like, so many people were waiting to play this game. But more than that, like, to me, the moment this thing became like it's starting to take its final form was, I believe, NCAA, I want to say 96. And I remember being in an airport. I can't remember what magazine I picked up, but I remember opening up the magazine and there was a gigantic ad for it advertising that all 85 Division 1 teams were going to be in the game. And that was such a leap forward from what we had, because the first game I had, you didn't have Notre Dame, you didn't have Florida State, you had South Bend, and you had Tallahassee. Like, it was only licensed in the sense that the NCAA didn't say no.
right, like
Right?
you're like, all right, can't wait to play Pullman. That's
Right.
gonna be awesome.
Right. And that was the thing. Like, some of them were dead on. You had Alabama, you had Florida, you had Miami. And like, as a 12-year-old at the time, it took me a while to put together, oh yeah, you can't copyright the name of a place. Like, that's why those things are what they are. And to play, I think the first championship I ever played in the game was Alabama versus Tallahassee. And it took forever for it to dawn on me, like, no, it's harder to say that you are using Florida State without violating copyrights than it is to say you're using Alabama without violating copyrights.
Yeah, and then I know they would go through so many iterations where like they would say, hey, and now we're adding Washington State,
Right?
Kansas State. Like, that would be a big selling point on the back of the game. You're like, holy crap.
Well,
Uh,
remember that the success, or at least the cult following, that NCAA football generated gave us March Madness from EA
uh,
Sports for a while. And they never, I mean, obviously you're talking about a much bigger field, but they never had the entirety of college basketball in there. And they added swaths of conferences at a time. So I want to say the first version of the game didn't even have full conferences. And then the next version had, the big, 7, I guess, at that time. And then eventually you got more and more smaller teams. But I think that because of the size of college football, because of the way fans of the sport follow the sport, and I think there are more people than we realize that embrace the whole national landscape of FBS football, I think EA Sports was pretty smart to recognize that if this thing is ever going to be a success, we've got to offer people everything. And even in the early years, that included FCS teams as well.
yeah, I do remember. The 2000 calendar year and the 2001 game is what got me really interested in this franchise. But I've gone back through and at various points in my life owned the systems and played the games or emulators of these sort of games with the copy actually in hand, people. That's the legal point. And I would remember, like, I would go back and sort of see some of the documentation and see sort of some of the back covers. Like, the back cover of a couple of these games was like literally just all the different entities that gave up their license. Like, they like they
Mhm.
licensed up. It's like, all right, uh, we want to tell you about the features of the game. You could do now a couple new different options, but mainly here are the 32 schools that are allowing us to like
Right.
licenses now. Like it was so different now, and sort of what EA Sports sort of ran into, at the very end, some 3,000 days ago, that the licensing went towards the players too, even though we didn't technically have their names. We had a lot of their very close lookalikes
Right.
in the game itself. And so when EA Sports finally had to say that we're sort of getting rid of this because schools got smart to the players are wanting money and stuff for this, so they said we're just going to start canceling our licensing with these deals. And EA Sports was smart to get out of it then. But I think for more importantly for me is that now that the NIL deal has just kicked the door down,
Yeah.
for us to be able to get this back, it brings up so many fond memories. And what I wanted to do on this podcast, this first podcast we did, is talk about how I didn't know how weird I was until this game happened.
Oh,
Right?
interesting. All right. So tell me a little bit about that. And then I tell you what, before you do that, let me throw something out there to that point when you talk about that NIL could kick the door down. First of all, Arky knows this about me to the point that it frustrates him sometimes. I am so pro player in the world of college sports. I hate that we haven't had the video game for 10 years, but EA Sports was getting, I mean, for lack of a better term, they thought they were too fucking cute, right? Like the example I use all the time is the last game, NCAA 2014. The quarterback for the University of Alabama, which for those of you that are new to whatever Arky and I do, that is my alma mater. I love them dearly. All right. The quarterback from the University of Alabama is not named AJ McCarron. His name is QB10. But QB10 happens to be from Mobile, Alabama, which is where AJ McCarron happens to be from. He happens to be 6'3", which is how tall AJ McCarron is. He happens to have black hair, just like AJ McCarron. I mean, if EA Sports had just let that element of realism be up to the players, we could have avoided a lot of this, A. But B, I always thought this would be a catalyst to get us to some version of NIL much quicker than we did, because to me, and I would love to have guys like our friend Cole, and people of that level, people that never became stars, but certainly were starters, certainly would have been in the game. I would love to know if my suspicion is right of if you just gave the guys that are in the game a free copy of the game, that's all they want. They would be happy to have it.
Yeah, I think with some of the weird large chunks of money that are going out there, there might be some guys that are different. But I'm with you. Like if somehow EA had just not wanted to go that real, right?
Yeah.
Because once you get a recruiting cycle in or two, all of a sudden, those guys are gone anyway. So you
Yeah,
don't have to
exactly.
worry about them. If you just and listen, my love for college sports is the name on the jersey and the logo on the helmet, right? Like that's it. Like I like some of these players, but once they go to the pro, like I don't care, right? Like my whole love for NCAA football was the expansive universe that is college football, the pageantry of that, and the ability to sort of mix and match with like endless options.
Yeah.
Not whether or not, Trevor Lawrence, is technically the quarterback, right? At Clemson. Fans can modify their own, rosters and upload them later, and that's not on EA. It's all good. If they had just gone up to that line of realism, and maybe the quarterback was a different pigmentation of Alabama, like
Agreed.
you could just do whatever you want, really. At that point, we'd still be having our game right now. I think in a large degree, it may have had a pitfall or two from like back lawsuits, but now, like you wouldn't now you can do whatever you want for the most part. And
honestly,
like you said, you don't even have to give a hard copy. You could download these copies now, and like boom, you're out less money. Like you just give a download code.
I truly believe we would have had at least 6 to 7 more games, because only now are we really starting to dive into NIL and what is fair payment to these guys. And who knows, maybe we would have had games this entire time. It is just a matter of working out, because you would have some wiggle room, right? To work out how far up to the line can you go? When do we have to start paying these guys? What is fair? What is not? And here's the thing. You talk about some guys are going to want more than others to be in this game. That's fine, man. I mean, there's so many forums out there where you can download, to this day, you can download modified rosters and schedules for every team in there. I'll just go get it off the internet. How many times playing MVP baseball, right? Or any of the basketball games where Michael Jordan wasn't licensed. How many times would you just create Jordan in those games, or Barry Bonds in MVP baseball in the games where he wasn't licensed? Like, fans can work around it. Fans can stomach more than I think these businesses give them credit for.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I can do it, but I do know that like on NBA 2K, you can legitimately create like a fairly large tournament, right? For college basketball. So like fans are, what is it? The necessity is the mother of invention.
Of invention, yeah.
So like, if they want it badly enough, they'll find a way. Someone will find a way to do it, and they open share all this stuff anyway. Why not get the students involved and the players involved too, and give all the fans something where they can get it legally anyway, and like a lot easier than going through some of these open share file sources to try to, put these files into a place that most of us don't know where this thing is going anyway. But I wanted to mention how this game got me in my feels, and not just my like happy feels, but like my weird feels, because these weird things still happen with me like today, and it all started from the NCAA football game video franchise. I remember going to college, and in 2007 or so, this is like going into my sophomore year, right? I move in with 3 other girls and 2 other guys. So there's 6 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Sure.
We're getting to the Cinemax part, right?
Yeah, we are.
Watch out.
Actually, what you're describing. What you're describing is Saved by the Bell, the college years.
I am. And Mike Golick is coming in.
Bob Golick.
Bob Golick. Sorry. Bob Golick, my Golick's father.
Proto-Golick, if you will.
By the way, I can't believe I watched basically all of those episodes.
I mean, but in hindsight, it wasn't hard, right? Like, there were only 13 of them.
It feels there had to be more.
No, there was only 1 season, and it did. You know what? Surprise, everybody! This is a Saved by the Bell, the college years.
Boom, roasted.
We gotcha.
Anyway, Slater was such a douche.
He was.
Yeah.
Although I really did like that episode where he got more in touch with his Latino heritage.
That's true. And then he really it really didn't make sense for him to call people preppy, or one guy preppy.
Right.
Anyway, so 2007, I move in with these people, and one day I'm just playing the video game, right? And I have my friend James walks in, and next to the TV, I have a notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And he walks in, and he looks next to the TV, and he sees his notebook, and he's like, "What's this?" And in it is written down every game results, every MVP results, every award that I had won, all the rankings at the time. I had kept detailed notes like 17 seasons deep. Like,
wow.
I'm a 20-year veteran coach at this point. And he looked at me and he was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess it's kind of my thing. I sort of keep up with it." And he looked at me and he smiled and gave a hug. He did the exact same thing. My friend, it couldn't have been. Then I felt sort of free to be weird, because I didn't think that kind of intuitiveness happened until that moment. That I know that there are other people out there that kept and probably still keep notes of their dynasty as it's going on.
I have been in one physical fight with my 2 best friends in the whole wide world. And they are the guys that also, like, ironically enough, were my sophomore year roommates. And what's weird is that my sophomore year would have been the year that the 01 version came out that you started with, right? So we lived in an apartment on the Alabama campus. So it was like everyone had their own room, but the good news is it was inconveniently located to everything. So you spent most of your time just playing video games anyway. We had a not poster board, but like banner paper that high school football teams run through. We had that size sheet of paper on our wall, and we had a rule. You had to win with every team in the game head to head against each other before you could use a team for a second time. And the only physical altercation I have ever been in was my roommate Steven trying to jump the line on using Rex Grossman in Florida twice.
Oh, fisticuffs.
The fight got so loud. And so when I say violent, I mean shouting.
Okay.
That by the end, all anyone could do was shove one another.
Yeah. And you know the worst part about all that?
By the way, there were 3 of us. One person wasn't even involved in the game that started the fight.
The worst part about all that is it completely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It completely makes sense. You have these ground rules for this game, and someone tried to break them, and you gotta have consequences for that.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that's so perfectly weird about this game.
To quote George Costanza, we live in a society.
In that same apartment, I was dating one of the girls before we moved in. And
oh, sure. That seems like a healthy existence.
So some way it did not work out, shockingly. One day I was in the bathroom doing the Lord's business, number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a knock at the door, and it's her at the bathroom door. And she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Oh man, how long have I been here?" And this is before like
I blacked out.
This is before like Blackberries and smartphones were like taking all of our time, on the toilet. And I was like, "Yeah, what's going on?" She's like, it's a lot of noise and mumbling in there." I'm like, "Oh." And I couldn't figure out what she was talking about. And then she walks away, and I got up, washed my hands, I looked in the mirror, and I was like, I got caught giving a press conference.
Yes, sure.
I was giving a pre-game press conference to the assembled media in the bathroom, answering their questions that I was asking in my head to myself.
Can I tell you how much?
Them, and that was the first time I felt like I think I need help.
Can I tell you how much more willing I would be to watch SEC or ACC or Big Ten Network if every coach did their midweek press conference on a toilet with their pants around their ankles?
It would be a lot more fun, honestly.
I mean, this is the thing. This is the whole point of this podcast, right? Like, getting to know Arky in this way, and really, like, we've known each other for about 4 years, but we've really only known each other for about 1.5 years, 2 years at this point. There is this element of I found my people to our friendship that I think, and I hope those of you listening recognize that, like, it's not weird to love this game as much as we do. I think one of the most interesting things, and maybe this is a whole topic on its own for a future episode, but it's worth bringing up now. I am always, or at least when the game was new and being issued every year, I always got super excited when the game gave me a whole new reason to love it again. And I want to say 06 game gave me 3 reasons actually, to really fall in love with it again. First of all, I know it's a very controversial decision. I love the college radio soundtrack on 06. I think it is excellent. I love so many of those songs that they chose for that game. All right, that's 1. 2, they finally listened to the people and got rid of the fucking momentum meter. The worst invention for the game. And then that was the first time, and really they did it more with 07, but that was the first time. Do you remember NCAA investigations in the game?
Yes.
Like, they were so rare in 06, and then in 07 it could be like, hey, your quarterback bent over and tied his shoe in class instead of listening. He needs to sit for 3 games. Like, they were just 2 total extremes. But all 3 of those things gave me a new reason to fall in love with it again, because I thought the momentum meter was genuinely ruining the game. So the fact they got rid of it was awesome. I love that every year they go to the Bethune-Cookman band to record all of the different bands' fight songs. But, to me, NCAA football was the classic turn off the audio and turn on your own music. So to do what they did, I thought was really cool. And then the NCAA investigation was just this really cool, silly little thing they added to the fold that plussed the game in a way that couldn't be replicated from the first time you saw that.
Yeah, I think there's so many things I want to get into when it comes to, NCAA investigations and probations and things like that we will tackle on future episodes, and elements we want to bring back and take away. We're not even close to scratching the surface,
Right.
On the show, when it comes to not only our love for this game, but for, just remembering the good times, hating a lot of the bad with it, and what we would like to see coming up in the future. But I'll say this: like, when you talk about finding sort of your people and sort of the squad that you didn't think were out there, like when James gave me that hug, right? Like, it was the most accepting form of like I had felt like I had gone to an AA meeting, right? And I had confessed something that I'd basically, like, I didn't hide the notebook. It just was always closed and like under the game system or something. And no one ever really cared to sort of look. But when it was open and he saw really the most anyone had seen inside of me, the fact that he was so accepting that there was someone else like that. I had another guy roommate there, David. He wasn't that into that game. Like, he barely ever played it, if ever. Like, I don't know if he ever judged me for it. We're still friends to this day. But it's one of those things where, like, finding the quirkiness, man, Demetri, I still, in the middle of the night, will go and urinate and ask myself a question or two. Ask myself a question or two while I'm taking a leak. About the next game, or, about practice or about a player. And, in my head, I'm always trying to think of, all right, I already asked this a bunch of times. How many more times can I ask a version of this question before? And how many nights can I go before I need to ask another version of the question?
I've been in the shower explaining to my imaginary agent what I'm looking for in my next head coaching opportunity before.
Oh man, we're two P's, and there's got to be more of you out there.
Absolutely.
If so, follow us on the social media, Arky, Shea, and Demetri Ravanos, all one words. Well, separately, two people.
I was about to say, in future episodes, why don't we put our Twitter handles down there? My name is not QB number 12.
Oh, well, I should mention that's a good segue here. This show will be a video podcast as well, not just as us speaking, but some interstitial video of the old video games and sort of highlights that are showing us and showing you what we're talking about, that sort of helped us really grow to love this game. And that really helped me grow, starting with the 2001 game, grow into really embracing being this kind of a freak. When it came to this video game, like, it was so much of me that I don't think I said I love you to my mom for 2 years. Like, I think it was so much that game, like that was the only love I could give.
Right.
And
well, it'd be weird to say I love you in a press conference.
And I'll tell you this, it would be. There was a very strong hurt when, like, 80 days later, they announced that they were going to discontinue the franchise.
Yep.
Because I knew, like, that was going to be for a while.
Yeah.
And video game systems were going to upgrade, and we may just be left in the dark, and who knew when that was going to be able to come back around. But, like, there was a distinct hurt in my heart that day when I read that press release, just knowing that such a big chunk of me was going away, and I didn't know how to get any new content with this. Like, I knew there maybe different conferences and teams and things like that. It wasn't all going to be there. Things were going to change, and I was going to get it kind of left behind.
Think about this, right? If we get the game next year, like we think we are going to, even if they had every team, or let's say they have every team, there is going to be 5 teams we've never seen before on the game. And that, by the way, is not including how quickly James Madison bumps up, how quickly Sam Houston State and Jacksonville State bump up. Like, we are going to have brand new teams and uniforms we haven't seen before. I want to wrap up sort of a little bit forward looking today. And this is going to be a full episode on its own, but it is something, like you talked about, feeling protective and feeling that love of the game. as we get to the new versions of the game, as we start to see, because by the way, the most interesting thing to me is when this game comes back, college football doesn't even look now like it looked in 2013, the last time we had this game. So is there something about college football that you are worried the game is going to have trouble translating?
That's a good question.
Because I have one very specific thing, but I wonder if there are things you think of that maybe I'm overlooking because I'm so hung up on one thing.
Do you want to mention it now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead. I think about, like there's the play everybody had, which was the toss to the halfback and the halfback throws a pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game never gave you enough time to let that play develop, no matter what defense you were playing. How on earth, and granted, there have been technological breakthroughs, I'm sure they will account for this, but in my head, it's really hard for me to figure out, how are you going to have RPOs in the game?
Okay. Yeah, that is a significant flag to be raised
right?
When it comes to sort of bringing up this game. And who knows, maybe by next year they stop with RPOs. The NCAA just
EA
says,
Sports calls every school and goes, look, guys, in order to make this realistic, we're going to need you to commit to either running or passing.
Yeah, listen, and frankly, mostly passing, only passing, actually, if we want to keep people excited. It's just too much stuff.
You know what? Did you throw away your playbook and just do 4 verts on every play?
Yeah, 4 verts. Hey, you know what? In a QB sneak, I'll keep that option. I'll keep an option for you. A QB sneak, 4 verts, and that's it.
That's all you need.
Well, HB smash. We can keep HB smash, 4 verts, QB sneak. We're done. We're done here. Good.
You know what? One old school true triple option.
but only one version of the option.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When I say one, I don't mean one playbook. I mean one play.
Yeah, when EA Sports would come out with some of these newer, I think most recently with 14, I was watching weeks ago. They had sort of their promotional video with like Kenyon Barner and stuff like that. They were sort of talking about it. And one of the Kevin Sumlin, who used to be a good coach at the time, and they were talking about like the different quarterback option types that they sort of added to the game. And you're like, okay, lots changed. I was thinking about that sort of simple thing. We're in a whole new world when it comes.
Yeah, seriously.
I did not think about them sort of implementing it, but yeah, that's kind of one of those. That's kind of one of those tough ones. Like, I don't know. I'd be interested to see. I'm sure they'll do whatever they can, but I don't know how limited that they might be.
Like I said,
again,
I mean,
who knows? It's been a decade.
Right. That's what I mean. Like our imagination is limited by having played the same game for a fucking decade.
That's true. It's like us staring at a parked car and be like, man, how do you move that?
Yeah, how's it gonna move? That's insane.
You can't. It just sticks there, right? Like it just. Oh well, like it's got wheels.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in the car and go to the grocery store. Okay, with your magic, that's how you're gonna do it. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Nice job, EA. Right? Gonna just magically move this car, EA. Okay. All right. But yeah, so we look forward to doing a bunch of more episodes. We're going to do them every Friday, right here on the YouTube channel. The YouTube is very easy to find. You can subscribe. It's my channel right now, Arky Shea.
Oh,
now, if we get a whole bunch of like subscribers for this type of content, I'll make a whole new YouTube channel for it. But it should be very easy to be able to find at Arky Shea. Is where these videos will be to see the video versions of them. And of course, for the audio itself, we are finally on Google. Thanks for getting on board. We're on Apple as well, Spotify, Castbox, whatever. If you have an app that listens to podcasts, we can be found there. Demetri, I think it's time to say goodbye to the good people and wrap up episode 1 of Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football video game podcast.
You were in the podcast. I don't know. I'm working on a tagline that ties in the game and all that kind of stuff.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't hate that. That. That's a very, very fresh start.
Hey, we're a 6-star show, and you're a 5-star in our hearts, listeners.
Mm-hmm.